What up, what up, what up? Another episode of the Fair Enough podcast. We're still doing it. We're making it. I'm here. I'm Luke. We got Hayden. We got Micah chilling in the hotel. Hayden doesn't have his hat on this time, so it's a little different. I like the AirPods back. I miss the headset a little bit, but it is what it is.
I know, I miss it too. It's comfy.
Yeah. So today we're going to do Dynasty wide receiver ranking. So we're going to do the top 36. We've kind of done some different numbers as we went through, but we figured for receivers, a lot of dynasties start three different receivers, so it made sense to rank all of the wide receivers 1, 2s, and 3s. We technically have a tie, so we're going to do 37 because 36 was a tie between Terry McLaurin and Rashee Rice. So Micah, it looks like you got McLaurin the highest there at 28. You want to talk about why you're in like with Terry McLaurin?
I have him at 28.
That's actually Hayden.
No, I have him at 28.
I changed the order on myself. That's on me.
Yeah, no, you're good. I have him at 28. I just think with the new addition of Jaden Daniels and then Cliff Kingsbury, I think that he's going to be a very big part of that offense. If Jaden Daniels is going to be as good as I think he's going to be, I just think he's a really good talent. I think he's going to get Terry the ball a lot. I think Terry has honestly just been missing a stud at QB. Sam Howell played pretty decent as far as passing stats went last year, and I thought Terry had a decent year, but not his best. I think he'll bounce back this year with Jaden Daniels, and I think he'll at least be a good pair for him for at least a couple of years. So,
yeah, I think my thought process with McLaurin is I feel like Jaden Daniels is going to be solid as a QB, but I don't know what the passing is going to look like right off the bat. And I thought that the peak of McDaniel's passing and then McLaurin's downfall would kind of line up a little bit. But I also wouldn't be surprised if what you're saying is right. And if Jaden Daniels is good right off the bat, Terry McLaurin's always just been good. Like he's never been great, but he's never been bad. And when you're talking about wide receivers for fantasy in like the wide receiver 3 range, that's actually a really good thing to have some consistency. So I had him just outside the top 36 at 40, but I definitely see why you could see him up there in that 28 range.
Yeah, I have him at 33 just because, he's going to get a lot of targets, and he's never had great quarterback play, and he's always been able to manage. But he's getting up there a little bit. He's 27, so he's not too old, but he's doesn't have a whole lot left. 3 to 5 probably, but he's going to get a lot of targets. So you got to have him up there in your rankings, in my opinion, just because of the volume he's going to get.
yeah.
I would agree with that, even though I didn't in my rankings. So,
Curtis Samuel leaving helps too.
yeah, it does. I really like Jahan Dotson. I think that he'll take more targets than thought, too. That's probably part of the process with McLaurin in my head. But overall, like, McLaurin's going to be really target heavy for 2 years, like you said, Micah. So take that for how you want. Next up, we got Rashee Rice. So, Hayden, you really saved him here. I had him at 45. Micah had him at 37. And then Hayden had him at 23. I think my big thing with Rice is I'm pretty sure that he's the third best receiver on the roster right now. And then you add Kelsey, so he's the fourth option as far as like skill wise at his position. Now he showed enough last year that he'll probably start ahead of Worthy on the target pecking order, but I think Marquise Brown is going to pass him nearly immediately. Marquise Brown is just better at routes and at just kind of he's better at kind of everything except for after the catch, which Rice is pretty good at. So I think that the targets won't have to be a necessity for Rice as they were last year with him basically being the only receiver on the roster that was worth a darn. And I don't know if with him not being able to run routes consistently, if he's still as targeted as he was last year is my biggest problem.
Yeah, my thing with him, the reason I had him off my list is the off the field issues. It's not so much the first incident, but it's then after already being in trouble. you're going to go ahead and go out and go to the club and be out of the club and then have another issue. That just, I mean, doesn't lead to good things. And it's just not something you want as a receiver. And it's just not smart. Other than that, like as a wide receiver, he's solid, but I don't know if he's skilled enough to offset his off the field issues he's been having.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's one of the only things I didn't like about him is that, but I am correlating that with he's just young. I'm hoping he's just made his couple of mistakes. He's going to learn from. He's going to probably get a suspension. So I think this year, as far as his rank as a wide receiver, I think he'll probably won't be up there because he's probably going to miss a few games and that'll hurt. But I don't know if I'd put him as the number one wide receiver. He's going to be very close with Hollywood Brown for me, but I think he's there for the longer haul. I don't think Hollywood Brown is there for the longer haul, in my opinion. I don't think he's going to be there as long as Rashee Rice, and Rashee Rice came on really well there at the end of the year last year, and I think Mahomes has all the confidence in him that if he's out there, he's going to give him the ball because he knows what he can do with it in his hands. And I think that's where he's going to make up a lot of ground fantasy is what he can do with it after the catch. And then also Xavier Worthy for me, I think he's a great piece. I just don't know how that's going to work. Like, I mean, I think it'll work, but he's a small guy. He's fast. He could get hurt pretty easily. I mean, he's already gotten hurt this past year. There's a lot of question marks there for me with him. I want to see what can happen because little guys like that, they don't always pan out. And that's why I think Rashee at worst could be the two. And I think that's going to be getting plenty of production because I think Kelsey is going to keep coming back just a little bit and be able to perform well at the end, but not all throughout the year, kind of like what we've seen. And I think he'll still get quite a bit of production.
Yeah, I think where my kind of like flex is in there is like I think this year Rice is pretty good, but my problem is I think the suspension's coming next year. Based on what I've seen from the legal process, not going to play out in time. I think that it'll actually happen next year, which I think is worse for Rice because then Worthy will basically have 6 weeks as the wide receiver one next year, and Hollywood will be the wide receiver one this year. So I just don't. I think that'll hurt his ceiling long term. I still think he's a good receiver for the Chiefs team, and I still think like he's a good player, a football player. I just don't know how for fantasy. I think that it's just going to line up where he's never really the number one option for his team again. So that's why I moved him down as low as I did. All right. At 35, we got Keon Coleman. I don't know about you guys, but these rookies were ridiculously hard for me to rank and put into these lists. I struggled so much, honestly. I had Keon Coleman at 31, Mike I had him at 36, and Hayden had him at 35. So, any insight for you guys into the rookies and just like how difficult that process was?
It was just really hard to rank them,
Yeah.
but it really depends on the quarterback play, honestly, a lot of it.
Yeah.
Like Lad McConkey, Keon Coleman, and both have solid quarterback situations. And so it's hard to bet against them, but I haven't seen anything, so it's hard for me to put them up there with some of these other guys.
Yeah. Like I had Keon Coleman the highest, and mine was quarterback play in a passing offense. So like Lad McConkey was below Keon Coleman for me. That's because I think the Bills are going to throw it 40 times a game, and I think the Chargers are going to throw it 25 times a game. I think McConkey's better than Keon Coleman, but I just like Coleman's opportunity more.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I thought it was pretty hard to rank him. I don't know. Keon Coleman, I just don't know enough about him. I mean, I like the fact that he's getting the ball thrown to him from Josh Allen, and Josh Allen, like you said, is going to throw it 30, 35 plus times a game. I mean, he's going to probably get plenty of opportunities. He could explode. I just don't know if he will. And I mean, it's just like some of those other rookies. There's just not enough known since I haven't seen him play yet.
Yeah, and the other thing is too, like there's a pretty big age gap in the rookies, which is interesting to look at. I think he's 21 point something, and then McConkey, like he's a full year younger than Lad McConkey. So that for me was kind of the flipping point between the two, but we'll find out. Lad McConkey's a little higher. Couple of you or one of you really liked him, so that moved him up. But like we were saying, it's hard for the rookies to really have a lot of talking points here because we don't know anything. Like I can tell you about their college film, but there's been a lot of rookies with really good college film that didn't do anything in the NFL. So basically, you're just judging landing spot. I loved his landing spot because there's not competition, and that's the thing that we do know going forward is his biggest competition for targets is going to be Curtis Samuel, who I think is a solid NFL receiver, but it's kind of proven he's never really going to be the one. So Keon Coleman really has the opportunity to take the one with Josh Allen as soon as he enters the league, which you can't ask for much more than that. All right. At 34, kind of the opposite of a rookie. In fact, the exact opposite of a rookie. We got Devontae Adams. He's old. He's really old. But my thought process is here. I have him 29. Micah has him at 34, and Hayden had him outside his top 36 to 37. So my thought process with Devontae Adams was just basically like, go get a ship. You got 1 year. That's all I think you have. But you're telling me I got 1 year of probably a top 10, and on this list, we're kind of hoping that everybody else gets into the top 10 at some point. That's the goal. So I'll just take the one outside of injury for sure, top 10, possible top 5 right here.
Yeah, I mean, the only person who had more targets than him this year was CeeDee Lamb, and he's going to have, I would think, better quarterback play in some way. I mean, can't have much worse than he had last year, if we're being honest. But I mean, I say that now, but
It's a big maybe.
He's going to get a lot of targets, dude, and they're going to try to get him the ball, and hopefully their quarterback's somewhat better than last year and can get him more production. But he's going to be up there for at least next year and maybe a year after. So with somebody who gets just that much volume, I got to have him up there.
Yeah, I mean, I ranked him outside. I mean, just right there where he could be, wide receiver 3, and obviously, I think he still will be. I just, for a dynasty reasons, I just didn't like him for the long haul because he's obviously old, and then I don't love their offense. I think is just going to be putrid this year. I mean, I don't see a lot of scoring coming from them. I mean, unless Gardner Minshew is that much better than what they had last year. And he might be. That might be sad for them. But, if he gets hurt, then holy cow, it takes a major drop off. So I just think I think he's going to see a lot of targets, like you guys said, but will anything come of them? I mean, and then I also think this is one of the last years, he's 31, I think. I mean,
he's 31, yeah.
It's getting up there for a wide receiver, and I think eventually he's going to start falling into that like top 30 range, and then he's basically a wide receiver 3, low end.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, obviously, I'm not saying he's top 5 or top 6 or something. I had him at 29. Like I said, I don't think anybody else here. I mean, literally, you're hoping for a wide receiver 1 season at some point in their career. When we're at that point, I'm just like, whatever. Go in on the guy that you got 1 year and just go for it. So,
yeah, go win your league.
All right, at 33, back to the rookies. We got Brian Thomas Jr. So Devontae Adams just smacked in there, old man between these two young dudes. Got picked by the Jaguars. I had him at 32. Mikey, you had him at 31. Hayden, you had him at 33. So all right there in about the same spot. I'm technically the middle. So one of you guys talk about why you like or dislike him, or just talk about him.
I like him, but I didn't love him enough to put him higher just because obviously we only have his college film to go off of, and that doesn't always translate to the NFL as well. But the thing I gave him a notch to go a little higher than Keon Coleman is because he's got height, he's got speed. He's playing for the Jags, so they're going to throw it a lot. And Trevor Lawrence is still he's a pretty good quarterback. I mean, I'm not going to give him I don't think he's top 10 right now, but he's definitely in that middle of the pack, fighting for that top 10 area. And then those LSU wide receivers the last 5-6 years it seems like they all been popping. So I'm just going to be a little cautious, but if it keeps that trend, I think he could pop.
Yeah, what I like about him a little bit is he's not going to have to be their one right away. Some of these other rookie wide receivers are going to have to step in and be their main guy. And so not going to have to step in and produce as a one right away, but it could easily work into that position over the next year or two.
Yeah, that's what I liked and disliked about him. So like for fantasy purposes, obviously you want to have the one receiver, then you just get more targets, you get more everything. But with his skill set, he's more of a deep ball guy. He's not really an elite route runner, and I thought the pairing with Christian Kirk here is really good. Where you have a guy that's 3rd and 4. Christian Kirk's a guy that can get you a 5-yard route, very technically sound, and then Brian Thomas is just over the top. Like, I'm going to throw it 50 yards. You go get it over everybody else. The problem that I have with Brian Thomas Jr. is not Christian Kirk, but it's Gabe Davis. I think their games are pretty similar, and I'm interested to see how that plays out. But overall, Brian Thomas Jr. is super talented. He was drafted in the 1st round, so you have to give him his flowers for that, and that's why I have him ahead of a couple of the rookies that we'll talk about in just a second. Well, just the one that we're going to talk about right now, which is Lab McConkey. I might have had him ahead, but I had him at 34. Micah had him at 35, and Hayden had him at 26. So Hayden's higher than the group by quite a bit here. Tell us why.
Yeah, I think he's going to pop a little bit with Herbert. Herbert's always been a really good quarterback. And he's had good weapons. This year, it's a little different. He doesn't have those good weapons, and I don't know that I really believe Quentin Johnson can get it done. I think Lab McConkey can come in there and steal the one pretty easily, unless Quentin Johnson really makes a stride this year. I mean, last year he struggled mightily, and maybe him being kind of like one of the main guys will help him. But I think Lab McConkey's got better route running, and I think they're not going to throw it a ton. But I do think that Jim Harbaugh is going to have plays designed to get him the ball. I think that Herbert's going to find some trust there, and when they do throw it, they're 20, 25 times a game. I think he's going to see, upper single digits in targets. I think he's going to be able to be that solid 2. And then he's young. I mean, relative for what rookies are, he's fairly young. So I think if he shows right off the bat he can be that, I think he can be that for the long haul.
Yeah, I agree with you. I just think that might be his ceiling. I think football-wise, he's the best receiver that we've talked about so far out of these rookies. Like Hayden said, his route running is elite. He's a very good athlete, which, until you really watch the film, like you're kind of like, oh, he's like the Julian Edelman type or the Danny Amendola. No, dude, this dude is a freak athletically. So he's very different in that regard. But I just think that with the way they're going to throw the ball as an offense, and then with his skill set, I just think he's more of like a Curtis Samuel type for his career, where he's a better receiver than it ever shows for fantasy. He just never really puts up those huge numbers for fantasy purposes. So that's why I'm a little bit lower here on Lab.
Yeah, I struggled with these rookies a lot just because I like to see a little bit out there, a little bit more. And I just don't have a whole lot to go off of. But I like his situation. But crap, I forgot what I was saying. But I feel like they're going to run the ball a lot more than they have in the past. And so, but who knows? I mean, he could start off hot. We'll see.
The thing that I did like was that he was at least going up against SEC defenses. So that's why I put him higher than the rookies that we've had so far.
Yeah.
Other than, I guess, Brian Thomas. But
yeah, one thing too that I saw for the SEC defenses too is that somebody, I forget who it was. I'm probably, if we ever get popular, I'll get flamed for not shouting somebody out. But they were talking about how when they were watching corners in the SEC, they're like covered everybody perfectly except Lab McConkey. And they were writing this on all of the SEC corners that are going in like the first round. They're like, great coverage, got burned by Lab McConkey. So he is really good at everything that he does. It'll be interesting to see if he can get enough targets and that offense can be good enough in the passing game for him to really thrive for fantasy. All right. Speaking of somebody who you wish you would have seen more, we got Christian Watson here at 31. He's been in the NFL, but missed a ton of games due to injury. I have him at 30. Micah has him at 28, and Hayden had him at 38. Right here, it's just, man, the talent is immense. Like, the dude is phenomenal every time he's on the field from a fantasy perspective, from a football perspective. When he plays, he scores a lot of points for fantasy, and the Packers look like a better team. I think Hayden will probably say it here. The issue is, can he stay on the field or not? And if he's not on the field, he doesn't score a lot of points. Pretty simple math right there. But I like the connection with Jordan Love. I think he's the most talented receiver in Green Bay. He's the only one I have of the Green Bay receivers in my top 36, just because he's really been the only one that's consistent when he's on the field on scoring points. But I see the arguments for other people, and I'll let somebody else talk.
Go ahead, Aiden.
Yeah, I obviously had him the lowest at 37. I saw, and Luke already led on to what my reason is. It's strictly just because of injuries. He's definitely their most talented wide receiver and could be a stud if he could just stay healthy. And maybe he will, and he'll prove me wrong. But just in his first couple of years, I mean, he hasn't even gotten a full year going, and honestly, I don't think he's really been close. He's missed a lot of games, and sometimes when wide receivers or running backs have that happen to them early in their careers, they just can't ever like get past that injury bug. And I just don't know if he's one of those guys. Like, I mean, like, he's gonna be wowing you whenever he's in there, but if he's only in there 7 to 10 games out of the year, I can't put him in my top 36.
Yeah, my thing is, from what I've read, I think they've kind of figured out the issue. So not only did the Packers dig into it, but they got a big grant from the NFL as like a prevention, future prevention on athletes and like hamstring injuries. And so basically, what they found out was one of his hamstring was 20% stronger than the other. And so he felt good, and that left hamstring was pulling, or whichever hamstring it was, his good hamstring was pulling the other one until the other one just couldn't keep up anymore, and then it just give out. So now it was a 20% difference, and he has it somewhere between 10 to 8, which is closer to normal, but he wants to get it within 6. Because, I mean, I mean, you're not going to be perfect. I mean, we jump off of one leg better than the other. Like, your legs are going to be a little bit different, but he wants to get them to as close as possible, and they think that's what his big issue is one of them's been so much stronger than the other. So I think he really has dug into actually trying to figure out what his issue is, and I think when he's on the field, he's excellent, possible top 10 wide receiver when he's playing really, really well. Um, but just got to figure, like you said, just got to figure that injury issue out. And I think he's got it figured out. So I think he'll be better in the next couple of years, but we'll see.
Yeah, Micah doesn't just do IT; he also does science. All right, and we'll just move on to the.
Go Micah.
We'll just move on to the next Packer receiver we got on the list. We got Jaden Reed here at 30. Like I said, I didn't have him in the top 36. I actually had him at 44. Hayden and Micah gave him a little love, though, at 23 and 25. So he still stayed in here at 30. My biggest thing, I kind of just touched on it, is I think that the Packers receivers outside of Christian Watson are unpredictable. And so I'm just going to pretty much avoid them. And it's really nothing against Jaden Reed. I think he's a really good player. But I also think that Dubs is good. And then you have, like Luke Musgraves, and now you have Josh Jacobs. So I just think their offense is too clouded. And especially if Christian Watson is on the field, then I'm definitely not in on Jaden Reed.
Yeah, my
Yeah,
big thing.
I had him at 25. Oh, sorry, Micah. I'll go ahead.
You
But
got it.
I had him at 25. I just think that he's going to be the most consistent guy. I think he was kind of the most consistent guy there towards the end of the year last year. And I think that he's going to keep building that chemistry with Love. Love struggled at the beginning of the year, and I looked at Jaden's stats, and it definitely reflected that struggle. And then as the year went on and Love kind of got hot, Jaden's stats picked up, and he started having some pretty productive games. I just think the main thing is I think he's going to be the most consistent receiver. Christian is the best receiver, but I think Jaden's going to be the one who's there developing that chemistry further. Like if Christian keeps missing like 2 to 3 games here, 2 3 games here, like I don't know that they can like always be like cohesive together, him and Love. But I think Reed will be that steady guy that he can always go to and have 5 or 6 catches a game and a touchdown. I think he's going to be a pretty solid 2 this year, and I think he can always continue to be that 2. I don't know if he'll ever be like a top 10 guy, but I think he can always be in that 20 range. Somebody you want on your team.
Yeah, what I liked about him was, I mean, he was wide receiver 25 last year, and only had 2 games where he played more than 70% of the snaps. But my big issue is playing time. Like you said, their wide receiver room is packed, so it really does depend on his playing time. I think his ceiling is extremely high, and I definitely think it's higher than the other 2. I don't think it's quite as high as Watson's, but I need to see Watson on the field a little bit more before I can put him above Reed. But I think he has the second highest ceiling on that team when they give him playing time.
Yeah, and that's kind of a stat that cuts both ways because, yeah, that's impressive to be at 25 with 70% of snaps, but it also shows like the team wants to use him as a gadget guy when he's only playing like 65%, 70% of snaps. So, is this the guy that they want to play all the time, or is it just the guy that they needed to use more often last year because Christian Watson was hurt or, the offense wasn't flowing as expected early in the year? That'll be an interesting debate going forward. If he doesn't get above 70% of snaps, I just don't think he's a playable fantasy guy week to week in that consistency metric. So moving on to another rookie. So I think this is our, 4th ranked rookie? I'm bad at math. Fourth ranked rookie. Xavier Worthy. We have him at 29 here. I had him at 26. Mike, I had him at 29. Hayden, you had him at 34. So, Hayden, why don't you start us off with the negative Nancy over here?
Yeah, and I hate to do it because I really hope he does pop. I feel like those fast, speedy, lightweighted guys, they either really, really pop. They're not like in the middle. They're never like super, just a consistent dude. They either don't do much or they pop off the charts like Tyreek did. I think he could end up being like that, but at least in this first year, I think it's going to be hard because, for one, I want to see how he battles the physicality of the NFL. I want to see if he can play all the games. I mean, he may not play every snap, obviously, but I want to see if he can be in every game and stay healthy. And 2 is with Rasheed and Hollywood Brown and Kelsey, and then whenever they hand it off to Pacheco, I just don't know if there's a lot of targets for him other than, your deep balls, your bubble screens, or some jet sweeps every once in a while. I think he'll be used more like McCole Hardman was in his first year in the league. Now, obviously, McCole caught a lot of touchdowns, so, I mean, that was great, but McCole was very touchdown dependent. So it was just hard for me to put him in that 2 range for a guy who I feel like is going to be very touchdown dependent. He might have 2 catches for 80 yards and a touchdown because he caught a 70-yard bomb and 1 10-yard bubble screen. And I feel like that could be his type of stats. And then next week he could have 2 catches for 15 yards.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's how he'll be used year 1 too. He's just really young. He's like 21.2. He's the second youngest of the rookies that we have ranked. So for me, he has a lot of time to develop. He gets Mahomes. My thing is with the speed guys, like you're talking about, you're 100% correct. I didn't get to watch when I was younger. I didn't watch football the way I watch it now. So Deshaun Jackson is not in this conversation because I think he would be ahead. But of the speed guys that I've watched, Xavier Worthy's the second best route runner that I've ever seen from those speed guys. Obviously, Tyreek is one. You don't see very many guys put it together where they're like super fast like that, and their routes they run are crisp. And he's still got a little bit of work to do. I'm not saying he's perfect by any means, but he runs really good routes. And so I think he can do a little bit more than that eventually. We always see rookies struggle in Andy Reid's offense. They just don't do very well. So I don't expect him to do a ton in year one. But like I said, next year when Rice is facing his suspension for the beginning of the year, I expect Worthy to be able to step into that wide receiver one and just not let it go. So that he would actually be higher for me if I thought he was going to perform a little bit more this year.
Yeah, and I don't think he's this high if he doesn't go anywhere but Kansas City. I think just the game plan they can make for him and the way they can utilize him. And we know Reed likes his fast guys who he can utilize in different ways. And so if he would have gone anywhere else, he probably may have not even made my top 37 or 36. But just because where he went and who he's got around him, I think he'll be a good, viable receiver for a long time to come.
Yeah, I think the only place that I would have him similar is Buffalo, and for completely different reasons than what you just mentioned. Just because he would be the guy. Like if he would have, they would have taken him instead of trading back for Coleman, and then Josh Allen also has the arm to make that work. But those are the only two spots that I think he really worked in. So mostly agree with you. Just got to tell you where you're wrong a little bit every once in a while. Okay,
Asshole.
Hayden. Now I have to mark that this isn't for kids on YouTube. You jackwagon.
No
All
kids
right.
watch it anyways.
Well, nobody watches it anyways, but that's not the point. All right. at, at 28, we got Mike Evans. I had him at 23. You guys each had him at 32. Kind of the same thing I was talking about with Devontae Adams, except for I think he's got a couple more years. So that's why he's higher than Adams was for me. Um, I think Mike Evans is a guy that if you want to win a championship for the next 2 years, he should be towards the top of your list of targeting. Um, the other thing I like about Mike Evans is that his play style isn't going to be one that like just falls off a cliff. The way he plays, he doesn't really use his speed or athleticism. Let me rephrase that. His speed and athleticism aren't super necessary to his game. So he wins by being bigger and stronger than you. He wins a lot of jump balls, 50-50s, things like that. The separation is there at times, but it's not consistent. And he just has a trust factor with Baker Mayfield to just be like, hey, throw it to me anyways. I know I'm not super open, but I'll get the ball. And that doesn't really change with time. You know, like he's not creating that separation really already. So it's not something that's super needed for him to be fantasy relevant. So I think you got 2 years here of Mike Evans. And I mean, as long as he plays, he's going to have 1,000 yards and like 6 touchdowns. So until that doesn't happen, I'm just going to keep betting on it happening. And I like to win. So I'm going to put Mike Evans ahead of some of these guys that are just really ceiling hopes. You guys have him at the same spot. So
I have him at 32, and I literally put if he was 2 to 3 youngers, I'd have him 2 to 3 years younger. I'd have him as a top
Youngers.
youngers. If he's 2 to 3 years younger, I'd have him probably close to a top 20 wide receiver. But he is just old balls. But someone to
sorry,
compare
kids,
him
you're done.
to.
No kids watch this.
The someone to compare him to is like the way I looked at it. He had the same. He had 4 more targets than Terry McLaurin, and he had 250 more yards and 9 more touchdowns. And they had
He's
the
a touchdown
same.
machine.
He had 4 more targets, and they had the exact same receptions. And he had 250
Dang.
more yards, 9 more touchdowns. But he
Part of
is
that is
old.
Baker Mayfield's better than Sam Howell. So
That is fair, but he's old, so that's the only reason I can't put him any higher. He's just old. He's so old.
and Baker likes to
Yeah.
chuck it. He likes to throw that thing deep.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't think he's going to catch that many touchdowns as he did this year. I mean, eventually you just don't get all those. I think it kind of comes back to the mean. And then, I mean, obviously, I still think he's going to be that solid. I mean, he can be a one, but I think he's more about very high end two anymore. Just because he does have his games where he just kind of disappears. Like it just depends on how Baker's playing sometimes, and it depends on how they're playing. I think they kind of tend to play more of ugly offense sometimes. I don't think it's very like efficient at times and pretty. So I think sometimes they win games like, 17-14, like weird scores that just don't get very high. And I think that that kind of hurts him a little bit. I mean, he's the main option there, but I think it just goes on how well Baker plays in some games. He's gonna go. He's gonna have games where he's gonna go off because, like you said, Baker's gonna throw the ball deep to him like five times, and he's gonna probably come away with three of them, and he's gonna break the tackle and go for a touchdown for all of them. So I mean, he'll have weeks where he just explodes. I just think that he's got that 1 year left, and I think he really starts to kind of pull back. I mean, when they get up into that mid 30s, lower 30s range for wide receivers, it's just hard for them to keep doing what they've been doing.
Yeah, and that's where I think he might have a little bit of a Larry Fitz to him of like the things that he does well aren't super reliant on athleticism. So I think he has a couple more years than like the Julio Joneses of the world that are reliant on their speed and their athleticism to really make plays. Um, so if you think he's 1 year left, I think you have him at the right spot at 32. I see 2 to 3. That's why I have him at 23. So um, tells me that I should probably go trade for Mike Evans in some of my leagues if I'm that much higher than the norm. Okay. Jackson Smith and Jigba at 27. I had him at 25. Micah, you had him at 30. Hayden, you had him at 29. I went first the last couple times. Micah, tell us why I'm wrong. Tell us why I'm too high.
Uh, Sorry, I was going to say something on Mike Evans real quick. The sad part
Oh,
is I have him as wide receiver 32, but I would not trade him at wide receiver 32 value. If that
and
makes sense.
that's how you should play it.
Well,
That's how you should play it because you
well
know
then,
somebody's coming to win. You should
well
get
then
them.
your ranking sucks, Micah. We don't count it.
All right. But Jack and Smith, okay. I can't even say that name. I can't read.
Just
Just
say
say Jax.
JSN. No, just say JSN.
J- JSN. Uh, so my issue with him is I don't know if Geno Smith can support two, let alone three wide receivers, and he's already got DK there. He's got Tyler Lockett. He really likes it sometimes, but he's so young, and he looked really good coming out of the combine draft. I have to have him up there in my rankings because Tyler Lockett's getting old. He may start working to that number two spot, and surely Seahawks got to realize at some point they got to go to somebody else other than Geno. So maybe they'll get a quarterback sometime. But I just don't know if until Lockett retires if he has much value.
Yeah, I think where I'm at is I'm looking at these guys that we're ranking, and I'm like, oh, there's people in the area, and it's all people that coming out of college I had JSN way ahead of, and the NFL apparently didn't, but he still went ahead of these guys. And so I'm like, okay, if I'm thinking JSN or somebody like that we've already talked about, like Brian Thomas Jr., it's like, well, I'm really doing the same thing. I'm betting on their college tape, and then for JSN, obviously, I have a little bit of NFL, but not a lot to really go off of. So I'm just like, who do I think would be the better receiver coming out of college? And for me, that's JSN because he's so young. He's kind of still in that age range of those rookies. So I think JSN would have been the fourth receiver taken this year, and that's kind of how I gauged it with the rookies and everything else. So I still kept him ahead at that 25 range. Of course, we've talked at length about how bad we think Geno is. I don't want to really do that again, but that part is scary. I just think that Geno probably has 1 year left, and then they're going to have a rookie of some kind. And I assume that Lockett will also be gone at that point because they'll want to rebuild with JSN and DK. So I also think they might trade DK. I've said that on the podcast before, but I think he could be gone this year too.
Yeah, I'm right there close to Micah at 29. I just think, kind of what Micah said, I think it's a little crowded right now. He's that third option. Whether or not he's better than Tyler Lockett, I think he is. But I think Gino trusts Lockett more, which is very valuable. I mean, Lockett's been a really great player, especially fantasy wise, for the last like 5, 6 years. Um, but I just think, Lockett, this is his last year. I think he may not perform, super high this year, but I do think as soon as Lockett's gone, he will. And then, like we said, you know, if he would have been with Geno that year that Geno played good and everybody was like, oh, Geno, coming back, now he's a stud. Well, Geno didn't play anything like that last year. He went back to the norm of what he had been his whole career. So I don't think that helped JSN at all. And I think a new quarterback will help him, and he will eventually get that.
I think it would be interesting to watch JSN with Sam Howell because Sam Howell really liked McLaurin, and I'm not saying they're the same, but they are pretty similar in that they use good routes to get open, and they're kind of that middle of the field, middle distance guy. So I think that would be a more interesting combination. Or if Gino can just turn it around, man. Like I have DK in a ton of leagues, so I'd really appreciate that. You just be better this year, okay, Gino. All right. There's my pep talk
Come
to
on,
Gino.
You're one.
All right, at 26, we have a tiny Tankto, mini tank. I have him at 27. Mike has him at 26. Hayden has him at 30. That's 5 below consensus. So I thought I was going to be the lowest here, but I'm actually the middle. So I'm not going to talk first. Somebody else go.
Go ahead, Micah.
All right. So the things I don't like is they gain Diggs, but I don't see Diggs being there more than 1 year. I think with that 1 year contract, he'll be gone there. His yak was absolutely terrible, not even in the top 50. But his yards per game was in the top 25. So I mean, when he was not hurt, he was putting up really good numbers. He was top 10 in yards at catch, but just couldn't go anywhere after, which might be due to his size. Um, but I mean, he was just good getting open, and but I'm scared this year. I don't think he'll do a whole lot this year. I think he'll have a couple blow up games, but I think he'll be really good after Dig moves on, and I think him and Nico Collins will really take off when Diggs gets out of there again.
Yeah, Hayden, go ahead. You're the lowest.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, I think this year is probably why I put him towards 30, and then also coming off of that injury. Um, I think he's going to be wide receiver three, which is exactly what he is on the team. I mean, they paid Nico Collins big money. So when you pay a guy like that, you obviously value him enough. He's going to be a top wide receiver for you. So I think he's probably the two. And Diggs is obviously the one because I think Diggs is the bigger talent. He's the bigger all-time receiver, but he's only there for 1 year. They just bought him for 1 year to try and make a bigger run in the playoffs, and I just think it's going to be a lot of competition for targets. I don't know if even if he, how healthy he stays, I don't know if he'll be able to have that same type of production he had in his first year because it was basically, Nico Collins taking the top off. He would just run deep routes, and Tank was kind of getting a lot of good stuff underneath and just running good routes and getting some good yards per catch. Um, but I guess it'll just depend on what happens after Diggs leaves, and then how healthy can he stay. He's a very small wide receiver, but he's very explosive. When he's healthy.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going to say to Micah's point. I don't think the yards after catch is a talent issue. I think it's the routes that he was running in that offense. He was just over the middle of the field a lot. Catching it between a couple guys. There's not a lot of space there. And Nico was the guy that was really had the space a lot of times and was the one getting more open looks when the ball was going to him. But my problem with Tanko, as everyone said, he's tiny. He's like 5'8", 165. That is incredibly tiny for the NFL. And I mean, Hayden kind of touched on it. He's the third or the fourth option in that offense this year. When you factor in like Dalton Schultz for touchdowns, and then obviously Stephon Diggs and Nico Collins, then you have Joe Mixon running the ball. Like, there's just a lot of people to go around. And then after that, I don't even get the one; I get the two. So for me, I'm not going to put him in the wide receiver 2 range. He's going to be outside of that for me. When he's going to be the wide receiver 2 on his team permanently, and the way that they brought in Stephon Diggs, like there's obviously not a lot of confidence in those two guys to kind of run it by themselves. So I assume even if Diggs is gone, that somebody else will be coming in the next year as well. So that is Tank Dell. 25, we got Jordan Addison. I had him at 28. Hayden had him at 24, and Micah had him at 27. So, Hayden, you were the highest. I was the lowest. My thing with Jordan Addison is kind of the same thing as Tank Dell. A lot of competition for targets. But instead of CJ Stroud, I get Sam Darnold. So I had him one spot below. Is kind of the same analysis for me. Obviously, Jordan Addison, I think, is a better receiver than Tank Dell talent-wise. But CJ Stroud's a lot better than Sam Darnold. So that was the nod for me.
Yeah, I put him higher just because I think he can stay healthy. I think he's already shown he can be healthier. Now that may just be a fluke and 1 year deal. You know, Jordan Addison could get hurt this year, and Tank Dell could have a healthy year. But I also like what Addison did. I mean, he still played beside Justin Jefferson a little bit. I mean, not as much as you'd like to see, but I thought he did fine whenever he was beside him. He was also having to deal with T.J. Hawkinson, and still put up good numbers. Now he's a little touchdown dependent, kind of. I mean, I think when I looked it up, he had 10 touchdowns, so that really helped him out last year. I personally think he's going to have a little better production outside of those touchdowns. I don't think he's going to have 10 touchdowns again, but I think he's going to be more involved in the target share. I just think Justin Jefferson, you know, he's so good and he can still defeat double teams, but there is that factor where you're getting double teams, so you just don't get the ball near as much as you did when you were getting. Like, I mean, it's just harder to get him the ball, and when you have Sam Darnold and JJ McCarthy, two guys we don't know a whole lot about, I just don't know that they're gonna. I mean, they'll trust him, but will they throw it into that double coverage in those tight windows for JJ?
Yeah, I was gonna say something about that touchdown dependent. I mean, he had 10 last year. Seemed to be where a lot of his big games came from. But even as a wide receiver too, he still had 108 targets, so he was still a big part of their offense last year. Just out looks wise, but it's hard to think with Sam Darnold back there. They're gonna get as many targets out and as many throws out. But he definitely will be a good wide receiver two for their team. But I don't know if he's good enough to make the wide receiver two list for fantasy wise.
Yeah, and I don't know this off the top of my head, but I want to say a lot of those games where he had those high targets were the ones that Jefferson missed.
Jefferson missed. That makes sense.
And so I don't think that he's going to have that high of a target because Hawkinson missed games and Jefferson missed games. I think obviously like I have him at 28. I still think he's a high end wide receiver 3 option. I just if he had Kirk Cousins still, he'd be higher for me. I'm just with the dip in quarterback and possibly a healthy Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson, I'm just going to have him a little bit lower in my rankings. But he's also really good. That's what's hard is like you get to this point and Jordan Addison's probably a better receiver than some of the guys that I ranked him behind, but it's just situation and things like that factor into this so much. All right, Micah. Do you have it pulled up right now? If not, I'm going to move on to Debo.
No, it's not loading. Actually,
okay.
I will be close. Yep, I got it. I just was looking at the wrong thing. Let's see. His targets games, week 7, week 8, week 12, and week 18.
So 18, Jefferson I don't think he played because he took the week off.
Yeah.
And then I don't remember when he was hurt, but it would have been close to that. That's what I wanted you to look up is when Jefferson was hurt. I had Addison's targets pulled up. Anyways, okay.
Oh, I can
24.
Quick. I just saw him. Give me a second. Give me a quick second. He's right here.
You got a second.
All right.
All I got is time.
He missed 6 through 12.
Bingo, bango. Okay. 24. Deebo Samuel. I had him at 24. Mike, I had him at 24. Hayden had him at 31. Hayden? Is it because he's old?
Yep, old, and he's got a lot of usage. I mean, they ran him a lot at running back, and I think I mean, at the time, it was really great because he's a weapon back there. But I think as far as his longevity, I think that's what it hurt. I think they got a lot of good usage out of him in those last 3 years, but I think he's been battered around. I think he's going to be very hobbled the rest of his career, especially since I do think they're going to continue to put him in the backfield because as far as other guys besides Christian McCaffrey, I feel like he's their next running back. So I feel like they're going to use him to spell McCaffrey here and there, along with whoever their other backup running back is, because they're not going to want to overwork McCaffrey. I just think, with age and then, he's become a little more brittle. And then as far as, you know, the whole contract thing, like, I don't know where he's going to be here in the near future. Like, I mean, I don't know if they're going to sign him. If they sign him, I would have probably been a little higher because I would have said Shanahan would have probably figured out a way to keep him valuable for the next 2 to 3 years. Um, but if he goes somewhere else, gets a little bit paid, and he's still that brittle guy and they just try to overuse him, I think he's going to become more injury prone.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. If he's not in San Francisco, I wouldn't. If I didn't think he was going to be in San Francisco, I would have moved him down too. I think Ayuk's the one that gets moved out of the two of them. He's younger, he's more valuable. I think they can tag and trade him and get a lot more out of him than they can out of Debo, and they're both super valuable to their team right now. My thing with Debo is like he's just so vital to the team. Like when he's in, there was a game last year where he's had 4 targets. He was the wide receiver 2 on the week. So the way that they use him is just super efficient. Those target numbers can get a little scary. That's why I have him at 24 and not higher. But I still think he's got 2 to 3 years left of being a wide receiver 1 to 2 range in that like 10 to 15, somewhere in there if he's healthy. So I'm just going to put him at 24. Kind of like I talked about with Devontae Adams lower. It's like I'm at the point where I'm deciding, do I want the guy with the ceiling that could have the ceiling or the guy that already does? And Debo was the very bottom of the group of people to me that still has already shown that they have a ceiling and still has that for a couple of years.
Yeah, my scariest thing about him is his targets for sure. But like you said, he makes with what he gets. I mean, he led the league in yak last year with over 8 yards a game, 8 yards of reception or whatever, or carry.
That's actually crazy.
But yeah, 8.78. He also led the league in broken tackles for wide receiver at 17. So like he makes do with what opportunities he gets. So that's why I had him so high. Is even when he's not getting many opportunities, he's gonna give you a decent week. Um, and so, but it's just I couldn't have him any higher because he's kind of old, and he really doesn't get that many targets. If he was getting more, it'd be hard not to put him even higher, even with his age.
Game. All right, 23. Zay Flowers. I have him at 34. Micah has him at 25. Hayden has him at 22. Hayden, let's be optimistic first. Build him up.
Yeah. The main thing is just because I think he's their main wide receiver. Last year he kind of started out hotter and then kind of fizzled out a little bit in the year, but I think that's also, I mean, I think they started running the ball a little bit more. I'm not 100% on that. Um, but I do think that Lamar Jackson is just going to use him. He's going to be his main wide receiver threat, and Zay's really good. I think he can be that one guy. He's not really like prototypical size of a one, but I think he'll be their one because he's their best guy. And Lamar Jackson, I think, will probably go out and put up a lot of stats this year. They'll win a lot of games with their offense. I think that he's going to have a lot of that target share. And then Mark Andrews would be the only thing that would scare me because Lamar Jackson tends to throw him a lot of touchdowns and a lot of balls when they do decide to throw it. But the only thing that helped me in that aspect is he hasn't been really healthy the last 2 years. But I guess Isaiah Likely would also, I mean, he fit into that role pretty good. But I do still think Zay Flowers will pop off this year.
Yeah, my thing is like you already touched on it. The reason he kind of fell off last year was they started to run the ball so much, and I think this year they're going to run the ball a ton with Henry and Lamar Jackson. So I just think the usage rate for that entire offense for passing game is going to be super low. Rashad Bateman scares me. It kind of reminds me of the Jaden Reed, Christian Watson conversation. Of if Rashad Bateman's healthy, I still think he's the best talent wide receiver on that roster. Just has never been able to stay healthy. So, like I said, I have him at 34, mostly because of usage. Though the Rashad Bateman thing didn't factor in hugely, but it was enough to keep him below some other guys.
Yeah. His thing is, it depends on like. I was just looking at his fantasy stats. Like it's like 11 targets, 8 targets, 2 targets, 10 targets, 8 targets, 2 targets. It's like it's not very consistent, and that would be an issue. Is just like, but then he has a game where he had 3 targets, but still had 106 yards and a touchdown. Um, so it really depends on how they're going to use them. If he's going to run the ball a lot, they're going to run the ball a lot. I mean, it's just given, but it depends on if they're going to make plans for him to focus on getting him the ball every once in a while. And I just don't know if they're going to do that. If they were, he would definitely move up on my list. But I think they're just such a run focused offense. It's hard to have him too much higher.
For sure, for sure. All right. Speaking of another consistency problem, we got George Pickens. I had him at 22. Uh, Micah, you had him at 20. Hayden, you had him at 27. So, Micah, I feel like you've been in the middle for like the last 17 people, so you actually get to go first this time.
All right. Luke, you every time you mute your mic, I don't hear your computer anymore, and I think it is like my computer messing up if I don't have my Riverside open. So when you mute your computer, I'm like, oh crap, what happened? I have to flip back, and I'm like, oh, he just muted his mic. I don't hear the airplane in the background. All right.
There's the
So
airplane.
George, uh, his thing is quarterback's questionable. We don't know what Russ still got, but I still think Russ hopefully still throws a decent deep ball, and I think that'll do Pickens well. I mean, he led the league in yards per reception and was top 10 in yards at reception. Um, and then he was also top 10 in yards after catch. Um, so I think if he gets a viable quarterback, he will really take off this year. But I just don't know if Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, whoever is throwing the ball, I just don't know if they'll do a good enough job because I think he really could be a solid wide receiver, but he just hasn't had very good quarterback play.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Luke.
before Hayden goes pessimistic, I really agree with 99% of what Micah just said. I just want to know if the consistency issues with George Pickens is more like, is that because of the bad quarterback play, or is that because his like inconsistent mentals that we've kind of heard about? But I will say one thing about the quarterback play. I don't know how much Russ has. I don't know what Fields is. Either way, that compared to Kenny Pickett is an immense upgrade. So I feel like you've got better quarterback play. I don't know if it's going to be good, but it's enough for Pickens to improve in that regard.
Still can't believe I didn't trade a first for Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, you screwed up. And I'm so glad that you didn't do that.
Yeah, the reason I have George Pickens at 27 is just because literally the quarterback situation. I think that's part of why he's been inconsistent a little bit. And also, he has some attitude problems. I mean, that's not the worst thing in the world. I mean, there's a lot of wide receivers that are kind of crybabies a lot of the time. But I do think the problem is I don't think his QB situation got a ton better. I mean, it got better, and I think one of those two will be the better option than what he had all of last year. But I just don't know if it does enough to make a big difference. I think he's still going to be an inconsistent enough wide receiver in fantasy that he's going to be more right in that two, maybe even three range sometimes. I think it just depends on what they do with the future and, what he continues to do and progress. But right now, it doesn't look like they're really building very highly in that quarterback room for the future. So I don't love them as much as I would if they were drafting a rookie that I think could become something.
Yeah, I still like Fields. I mean, I know I'm in the minority in that room, but he's still got talent. I think that he'll be taking over for Russ at some point this season to kind of see what he has. So that will probably determine George Pickens' immediate future of can Fields turn it around or not. So, all right. At 21, we got T. Higgins. I had him at 20. Micah, you had him at 21. Hayden, you had him at 17. So I'm in the middle. Somebody else starts off.
I'll go. I had him high just because I think he's on a team where he's the two. A lot of weeks he is a two receiver, which is where I put him at. But I think he's got such a high potential to be a one. I think that's why I think that's why he's not going to be on the team next year. I think he's going to be on a different team for whatever reason. If they end up trading him or he just signs with another team, however it happens. But I think if he goes to a team that really needs him, I think he'll be the one, and he'll show it, and he'll have a top 10 year. But I just think competing with Jamar Chase for those targets and touchdowns, it's just hard because Jamar is really good. I just think T kind of falls more into that really, really high two and can bounce around in that one range.
Yeah, I think this year he may he'll sit around there around that too. But I agree. If he goes somewhere else, he definitely moves into the top 20 for me easily, if not higher. Last year, I just saw a lot of like mental stuff. I mean, he had 7 drops, and they were a lot. Like I remember watching because I have a few too many stocks of him in fantasy football leagues, and there were just a lot of mental drops, and that's just a hard thing for me to like. Uh, that's a frustrating thing, I guess, as a fantasy owner. But it's also like, okay, he clearly wasn't in it last year. I mean, he also had injuries dealing with again. Um, but I definitely think he could move up, and if he goes somewhere else, and because I mean, he is a great receiver. I mean, um, what was I looking at? I
I
was
just
looking
didn't want to base it off of like how their year went because like whenever like they're having a bad year like that and you're used to success, I feel like sometimes some people don't take it as well, and I think that could have been part of it. That doesn't show great on his part, but I think if he's with somebody who's pretty capable, that helps.
I
And
think
I think him and Chase both had a bad year. I mean, their targets were insanely down, both with Chase gone or with Burrows gone. Both their targets dropped tremendously. So I think both of them will have a bounce
Yeah.
back year. I think he really needs to go somewhere else to really move up on my ranking list.
Yeah, I agree to move up. He definitely has to go somewhere. I kept him at 20 because you never know with those landing spots if that's going to be better or worse. With Cincinnati, like, yeah, he's the two, but he's the two for Joe Burrow. That's better than going to like Carolina and being the one for Bryce Young. Like, I'd take him there in Cincinnati every time. So I just had a middle of the twos. As long as he's in Cincinnati, he's not going to have a ceiling, but I think he still has a pretty high floor there in Cincy if he's healthy and Joe Burrow's healthy. Not a lot to say about T. Higgins besides he's a really good two wide receiver. So it just kind of puts him in the middle there regardless. So next up, we got DJ Moore. I got him at 15. Micah, you got him at 22. Hayden, you got him at 20. Um, this one was kind of surprising to me that he was this low for you guys and for consensus. I almost moved him up a couple spots as well. There was a couple guys that it was DJ Moore and it was a coin flip. For me, he's the one wide receiver on the Bears, and it's not close this year and going forward. Roma Dunze is really good. I like his film a lot. I just don't feel like he's going to pass DJ Moore. DJ Moore is one of the best wide receivers in the league. Last year with Justin Fields, Tyson Bagent, he was going nuclear. Obviously, Fields doesn't even have a starting job this year, and Tyson Bagent should not have been on an NFL field playing football games ever. Like, that is a disgrace to the Chicago Bears franchise. But that's neither here nor there. You can't have D2 guys playing QB coming right out of D2. He was not ready for that. He did way better than he should have, but I'm just saying, like, from a talent perspective, he was not close to being on that field. So when you're scoring fantasy points and that's your quarterback, that is beyond impressive. And then you add, like, in Carolina, he's never had a quarterback either. So he finally gets a QB that should be good. I just love DJ Moore this year and going forward. He's not as old as he feels like. So for me, he is just right on the verge of being in that wide receiver one range.
Yeah, I put him at 20. I just thought he was a little bit further back from what Luke was saying, just because I think the Bears have a lot of weapons. I think, um, I think Roman Doomsday, I probably like him more than Luke. I think he's going to develop a really good chemistry with Caleb Williams, and I think that's going to continue for a long time. I think they're going to be a really good tandem together. I mean, I think DJ Moore and him are going to be a really good tandem too. I just think DJ Moore is just a little older. I mean, he's not old, so I'm not, saying, oh my gosh, he's only got like 1 year left, that type of thing. But he is older, so that's probably why I put Roman Doomsday above him. But I do like DJ Moore. I think he can dabble in that one area, but I think he's going to be more in the two just because of how many good weapons they have. I mean, they added Keenan for a year. I mean, I know Keenan's old, but Keenan still was pretty productive last year when he wasn't hurt. And he's going to be asked to do less on this team, I feel like, than he was last year for the Chargers, who were trying to do everything they could to just battle. And, like, everybody was getting hurt for that team, and so was Keenan. Mike Evans obviously always gets hurt. But I just think Keenan, I mean, he's probably above Rome just because actually, I don't even know. I would assume he'd be above Rome just because he's a veteran and Rome's a rookie. But either way, I mean, Keenan would be a great 3 or a great 2 on that team. And I think it just makes it to where targets are thinner for all 3 of them in the first year.
I'm just saying, if Roma Dunze is the 2 this year and you notice that in real time, you should be offering everything in your mother to go get him, because if he beats out Keenan Allen his rookie year, that is so impressive. Keenan Allen's a stud. He's just old. I mean, like,
I think it's possible.
Like I said, if you notice that in real time, seriously, go offer 2 firsts.
I'm on everything in the book at him if he does that.
Yeah.
My thing is with DJ Moore is with rookies, you just never know. Rookie quarterbacks coming in, you never really know what you're going to get. Of course, Caleb Williams supposed to be the next thing, and I think he will be solid, definitely solid. But DJ Moore's 27, and so I think by the time him and Caleb really get a big connection, he'll start to get out of his prime. I think these first 2 years he'll be really good, but just the next couple guys that got above him are just so much younger. It really just comes down to that little bit of age gap. I think he'll be really good for the next 2 to 3 years easily. It'll just depend on how quickly Caleb develops, and I think he'll take a small step back this year, just with Keenan Allen in the room, but not a major step back. But just enough to make me kind of drop him down my list. If Keenan Allen wouldn't have went there, I would definitely have him up there near my top 15. But with just that little more competition this year, it's really going to be whoever Caleb Williams develops a connection with first. I think Keenan Allen or DJ Moore could both really have good seasons, and it may just be game to game depending on how Caleb feels in the coverage.
Yeah, I think my point with that is kind of what I was hinting at, but their new offense and their new OC and everything they're doing with Caleb Williams, I think that technically from like a target market share percentage, DJ Moore will be lower, but he'll still have more targets this year because they'll throw the ball significantly more because they're not playing those crappy QBs and they're not playing Matt Eberflus's just straight defense and run the ball and try not to lose games on offense, I think Caleb will be better than that. So that would be where I kind of come from with. I still think Keenan does bite into that a little bit, but I think DJ Moore still plays better throughout the year. All right, at 19, we got Devonta Smith from the Eagles. I got him at 17. Micah, you got him at 19. Hayden, you got him at 16. So this is our last one for this episode. One of you two started off. I'm the middle again. Not used to this.
Go ahead, Micah.
With him, you can with the Eagles. I've always considered them 1A and 1B. But looking at their stats, I mean, Devontae Smith had 40 less targets. I mean, he was still top 20 in total yards as a second target. That's kind of crazy to me. He's still a good wide receiver too, even though he's their wide receiver too on their team. I shouldn't have put so much on this screen. There's just so much to look at. I put way too many stuff. I went way too but
too much.
He is the top tier of wide receiver twos on their team. I mean, you can't find much better of a second option other than maybe Jalen Waddle as a guy who isn't their main option. He's still, like I said, still top 20 in receiving yards as a second option on the team.
Yeah, I think my biggest question going into this year is, do they still throw the ball enough to support two receivers that highly? Because I know A.J. Brown's going to be the one that gets the main targets, and then you have Saquon coming in. Are they going to really commit to running the ball? Because last year, a lot of those games where Devontae Smith went off were those games where when DeAndre Swift had 4 carries and didn't get the ball at all. So I don't know if they commit to giving Saquon the ball too much to where Devontae doesn't have those high ceiling games, but either way, he's the second best wide receiver 2 in Dynasty. He's young. He's on a good offense, and he's tied to a solid quarterback. So,
yeah, I probably had the highest at 16. I just think, I mean, he was solid last year. He was wide receiver 17 from what I looked up, and then he also had 112 targets and 81 catches. And so for a high end 2, that's pretty freaking good. He had 1,000 yards and 7 TDs too. So I mean, and they really kind of stunk offensively the last 6-7 weeks, and then their playoff game. So I think they'll be better than that. And then also, I just think Kellen Moore's offense is kind of a faster paced offense. So I think as far as throwing the ball, I think that helps out for that. The only question mark would be for me is Jalen going to revert back to what he looked like the year they went to the Super Bowl? If he looks like that, Jalen, then I think Devontae could even be higher than this.
oh yeah,
easily. But it just depends for me with Jalen. I mean, he's just kind of made me question him a little bit more. But I know people have said injury things and stuff. I mean, I don't know what to believe. I'm just going to see what he looks like this year. If there's an offense that I think he'll throw the ball in better, I think it'll be Kellen Moore's. Kellen Moore runs a faster pace offense. So I think they're still going to run the ball, but I do think I think it's going to be very balanced, and at times they're going to throw it more than you would think.
Yeah. Kellen Moore, I kind of forgot he was there too. That'll probably feel a little Oklahoma-esque for Jalen Hurts, the way that they play, that pace and things like that. So that might be a huge upgrade for him. So, all right, that is 36 through 19. We're going to pop out for a second, and we'll run back the second episode. So for you guys listening on a podcast or on YouTube, this is the end of this one. So adios.
See ya.
Peace.